Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be watching a video called How I See the US After Living in Europe for 2 years. So hopefully it's going to be positive. I hope so. I don't know, but let's check it out. So comment, like, subscribe, and start.
Took one of the biggest risks of my entire life. I sold everything I owned, told my family and friends goodbye, and started a new chapter in Europe. Portugal, to be exact.
And Portugal. Beautiful house.
Damn it. This is how I see the US after living in Europe for almost 2 years. And let's just say it changed me, but not in the way I thought it would. I'm going to be brutally honest and not going to hold back. Keep in mind these are only my opinions and you can take it or leave it, simple as that.
Of course.
Ever since the first time I had visited Europe back in 2011, I knew that I wanted to move here at some point. Gain some new perspective and introduce a new culture into my life. And what better place to do it than Europe? Instead of 50 states, there's 50 different countries that speak completely different languages and all have diverse food and cultural backgrounds. So I'm going to start with the biggest difference that I found between United States and Europe, and that is the work-life balance. Now, this is a big generalization because I know that there's countries in the European Union that work very hard and want everything to be perfect. Germany. But for the most part, it seems that one of the most important things to Europeans is their quality of life. There is this generalization that a lot of Europeans don't work as hard as Americans.
That's not true.
I don't think that's completely true. Many cafes and restaurants in Europe have the same owner from the start to finish. They never retire. They do the same thing with very exceptional quality until the day they die. And this isn't something that happens too often in the United States. This is one of the reasons that I think in Europe, the food quality generally tends to be a bit better, even the fast food. The European fast food tends to still have fresh ingredients if they aren't the franchises from America like McDonald's. You can't compete with a restaurant whose owner has been cooking the same dishes for 50 plus years. And it's pretty obvious when I speak to friends and family back in the United States that they kind of have this rushed agenda where they're trying to get as much done as they can throughout the day. And this was me included when I lived in the United States and I was working 12-hour days, sometimes 6 days a week. But I was missing out on some of the most important things like stopping and really listening to my friends and family. And I think that this is one of the most important things to most Europeans. I think this idea in the United States of having these big achievements and never being forgotten is something that's really important. However, in Europe, they have the right to be forgotten. There is actually a law in Europe that is the right to be forgotten. Now, this is a foreign concept that I don't think Americans think about a lot. In Europe, if you've had an imperfect past, the European Union allows you to move past that. And this also means that in Europe, people have the right to have their personal data erased. Once the personal data is no longer necessary to the organization collecting it. While in the US, forcing removal of articles on the internet is impermissible under the First Amendment. Now, after living
I have to say this is very funny because I'm thinking you usually think of like the United States as like the land of opportunity where like the American dream, everything can be achieved and it doesn't matter where you're from or what's your past, like you can achieve like great success. So it's funny that Europe is like the opposite where like, no, you can literally erase your past if you've done like not so many like great things and you can just start anew, which is like, shouldn't that be the United States? I don't know.
In Europe for almost 2 years, I have come to the conclusion that the United States is currently in a state of toxic extremism. It's not very common in Europe to hear people arguing about politics, blaming unrelated issues on opposing political parties or specific politicians. It's just something you don't really hear that often. Now, that doesn't mean that Europeans aren't political. However, you don't see it tearing apart families based on the president or prime minister that they voted for. When I go to family gatherings in Portugal, rarely does politics ever come up. And this is something very polarizing and disappointing in the United States. I can't go anywhere in the United States without somebody blaming something on Biden or Trump, like they're responsible for everything that's gone wrong in the past 10 years or something. Now, sure, I have my political beliefs as well, but I usually keep them to myself and don't ruin everybody around them's energy and vibe. Now, in Europe, they have witnessed all of the extreme political swings, and they are living in a direct result of the aftermath, which is why they are a little bit more hesitant and seasoned when it comes to political matters.
That's a good point.
If you come from a place in the United States like Detroit or Flint, Michigan, like I do, then safety is a night and day difference here in Europe. Especially Portugal, which has been ranked one of the top 10 safest countries in the world. After living in Europe for 2 years, I've been able to let my guard down and not be as paranoid. Especially when I'm walking around alleyways at night or going to see a movie or going to a festival, I don't have to worry about the place being shot up. It's very sad, but this is a true reality in the United States. And in the USA, wealthy people have moved to the suburbs in gated communities because they fear the inner city's rising crime rates. And I can't help but to think back in times when I lived in Los Angeles where I was robbed at gunpoint, or when I lived in Reno, Nevada and our family house was broken into multiple times. And sometimes it makes me apprehensive to come back to visit the United States. And if you've ever had a gun held to your chest, I'm sure you can sympathize with what I'm talking about. But after being in Europe for a couple years, there are few places that have violent crimes like the United States. Europe is certainly not a perfect place, and you do have crimes happening here. However, nowhere near the scale of the violent and gun crimes happening in the United States. A place where you can be attacked in the streets for your beliefs. And that concept to most Europeans is completely foreign. Now, I know that prejudice exists here in Europe. However, I have never heard an ethnic or racial slur ever yelled on the streets like I have in the United States. And that should say a lot.
Are you...
All right, now let's talk about the food.
Someone insulted
Unless you have the financial means to do so, you are likely paying 4 times for gourmet foods in the United States, where in Europe, these foods are just the normal. In America, fresh, healthy food is usually sold at a premium where only the richer people can afford it. In my opinion, this is a crime against humanity. Here in Europe, they subsidize the agriculture so that it can still be sold at an affordable price. And more than half of the GMOs and chemicals available in United States foods are illegal in Europe. Typically in Europe, teenagers speak multiple different languages. They're well versed in fine arts and music. And they understand world geography. Generally just much more cultured than what I see typically in the United States.
America could never.
I mean, when I first came to Europe when I was 21-year-olds, I had 17-year-olds playing me Mozart and Bach and painting incredible paintings and speaking 4 different languages to me, and I realized that, wow, I am not cultured at all. And I think a big part of this is attributed to education. All over Europe, schooling is free. And some of the best universities are even free. Students here can focus on their passions, and if they don't like what they're gotten into, they can switch it without being in this massive mountain of debt like in the United States.
You have to stick it out.
Students in Europe can focus on their passions. And if they made the wrong decision and don't like the career path they're taking, they're not in mountains of debt like they are in the United States. They don't have the strong pressure to continue to pursue something they don't want to do. And I think this is really important. Some countries in Europe even allow you to go into a specific trade of choice to be able to follow your passion and not have to learn all of this useless knowledge that has nothing to do with your career path. I know many people, including myself, that are afraid to go to the doctor in the United States because of how much it's going to cost. And it's a complete opposite contrast here in Europe, where many of my friends go to the doctor regularly just to get a checkup because they can. And it seems to be encouraged by the doctors. In Europe, things like blood tests and exams are a fraction of the cost that they are in the United States. For instance, I went to the hospital and needed to have an x-ray done on my finger. And I went, no, how much is that cost? And they said, €1. And I went, can you put my whole body into the x-ray machine then? Just kidding, I don't need any unnecessary radiation exposure. But I don't think that people should be in fear of going to the doctor, and this is the reality for a lot of people in the United States. Currently, I pay a premium healthcare insurance in Portugal for about €85 a month, and that includes just about everything. Whereas A not so good insurance in the United States that I
It's
was
like
paying
$200.
$500 for a month was never accepted anywhere and was a complete hassle to have. So the polarization is pretty crazy in terms of the healthcare here. Now, I will say that the public hospitals tend to get overrun here in Portugal sometimes. But because I have private healthcare insurance, I can use any of the private state-of-the-art hospitals located anywhere in Portugal. And I've been there a couple times and they're super nice and I've been really impressed by the facilities. Now, alcoholism certainly exists in Europe, that's for sure. But the drinking culture in the United States is completely different than most of Europe, maybe more similar to Ireland or United Kingdom. A lot of European countries have a long history with wine and beer, and they've developed an art form on when and where and how much to drink. In comparison to the American binge culture, shots, 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 shots. This doesn't really exist in Europe for the most part. In fact, it's very rare to see people taking shots, and if they are, they're these little baby shots that are half of what they are in the United States. I feel like in the United States, it's encouraged to get wasted and get super drunk, and people brag about these experiences. But in Europe, you don't want to be that guy. Don't be that guy stumbling.
But I do think there's like a particular situation that happens here, and it's because in Europe, because there's like less taboo about like alcohol, I think parents are usually more lax about giving alcohol to their children. Well, not children, but like teenagers. And it's not encouraged, but it's fine. And teenagers usually like have a drink or two, and it's like a glass of wine, or maybe like some beer, and it's okay. So again, you don't really see the need of like, oh, I'm turning 18, I'm gonna binge drink, and I'm gonna have like so many shots, which in counterpart the US does have because it's forbidden. So when they turn 21, it's like, oh my god, I'm gonna have all the drinks in the world. So I think that makes a huge difference.
Through the streets, they will think you are a complete idiot. Do yourself a favor and don't be that guy. But how I see the United States now is not all negative, and there are some things that I took for granted while growing up there. One of those things is the American dream. Now, a lot of people said that is dead, but I believe the spirit is still very alive and well. The concept of entrepreneurship is not as popular here in Europe as it is in the United States. The United States is a place where people have a dream and they can move that future forward. And I have to credit that optimism for the entrepreneur spirit that I have today. And I never realized how truly American this concept was. And I would not be where I'm at today without this hustler go-getter mentality. And I have to give massive credit to the United States for that. I think a lot of times in Europe, it is this foreign concept to have this grandiose dream where you can live in financial freedom and retire early. But I believe Americans have the spirit of working very, very, very hard to be able to retire and enjoy, a certain amount of your life. However, one of the biggest problems is that people don't end up retiring until 65 in the United States.
Like, how much life are you going to get?
Over. So younger Americans now want to retire at 40 and 35 if they can. And more power to them if they can figure out how to do so.
Who can, actually?
But after painting these generalizations with such a wide brush, it's important to mention that there are countercultures and micro-communities all over the United States that also criticize many of the things that I mentioned in this video. There's an America that I love and miss so much. But of course, there are truths to the stereotypes or else they wouldn't exist. But at the end of the day, honestly, I'm just trying to have an open, fun conversation. And that's one of the beautiful things about living in the free world. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this. Am I just trying to put everybody into a box, or is there so much more nuance to all of this? Either way, I will be continuing to make videos all about Portugal. If this is something of interest to you, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. This is some guy named Dave in Portugal, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, so a lot of the things I liked it, but it was a lot of the things that he said. I was left wondering, like, does he mean? I think because obviously that's his perspective, and he lived. Well, I don't think. Yeah, he didn't mention any other country, so I do think like he was just like he has lived in Portugal. And it's probably the only place. I'm guessing he obviously has visited other countries in Europe, but I think he was very like, I don't know, it's all very like insular about Portugal, and he was like generalizing a little bit, the whole European continent. which is kind of funny, but I do like the fact that he at the end was like, I get that obviously I'm generalizing, it's a cliche for a reason. Like, I know that not everyone, not all people in the United States are like that, and not all people throughout Europe are like that. But again, like, there's maybe some certain truths, and again, maybe the average European or the average American, like, that's probably like where this whole thing is going. But it's funny that he's like generalizing in the United States, because obviously he's American, but also like in Europe, he's just like the whole European continent, where obviously like there's gonna be again a little bit of nuance. Not all countries in Europe are the same, but again, I can see what he means. There are a lot of things that are just, it's the whole European, not just the European Union, just like the whole European countries, like they work like that. So I get a little bit what he means. But I think like probably the most like interesting part about this whole situation, or probably like the thing that I'm like, wow, it's a little bit surprising to me that he mentioned it. Like, it was like the very first thing he mentioned was like the work-life balance, which I think it's a lot of things that probably like people take for granted. Like, I don't think it's one of those things that people like necessarily like think about when they think about like, oh, differences between like the United States and Europe. Especially because it's something like, and it goes both ways. If you have lived in Europe like your whole life, you're probably not thinking about like, oh, is it like a good work-life balance? Because again, it's a given for them. And in the United States, probably they're not really thinking about it either, because it's like, I don't know, it's just like the way life goes. And it's only when Europeans move to the US and the Americans like move to Europe, is like where they get, there's a pretty stark difference here, which I find very interesting. Because it's like, yes, like it's so, I get that he's like, well, in Europe, I think there's like maybe a little, I don't know if it's a little, like, again, it's a cliche, but not really a cliche. Like, oh, Europeans, they don't really, like, they're lazy and they don't really work, which is crazy. Obviously, like, people are working. It's not like, oh, people are super lazy. It's just that they take it, like, a little bit easier on themselves. Like, like they open a little bit, they're not super open, like, super early. They usually take, like, a pretty long, like, lunch break. I don't know, like, it's more like that, and there's less emphasis on, like, maybe if your boss, like, wants you to stay late for work, like, constantly, like, I think in the US, that's probably, like, a given, or you're expected to maybe, like, reply to emails, like, after your work hours are finished, when I think, like, in Europe, that's really not the norm. So, again, if you've lived your whole life in the United States, you're gonna be thinking, like, whoa, like, that's so relaxed. They have, like, a pretty relaxed, like, work environment if you ever, like, work in Europe. But it is very interesting. And he's like, well, it's more emphasis again, and I think that goes along. Like, they don't necessarily like work. It's not that they're lazy or they work a little bit less in Europe. It's just like they work maybe more efficiently, I should say, because it works for them. And it's kind of crazy. It's like, well, they work less, and they probably earn a little bit more, because probably like if you compare both, like how much people are earning, I don't know, maybe like in the United States, like people earn a little bit more. But I always say, like, it doesn't really matter how much you earn. Like, you have to see like if that amount it's enough for like your lifestyle. So it's not really like when people are like, oh, in the United States they have like huge salaries. It's like, yeah, but is that enough, like, to actually make a living? Because if it's not enough, like, well, you would rather probably like earn a little bit less, but still you're gonna have like some money left over at the end of the month to save. So it's like, again, it's like the lifestyle costs, I think, are a little bit different. But again, I think I prefer, like, obviously, like, the European way. It's not just because, again, it's not just that they're lazy. It's just, like, again, like he said it, they not only live to work, like, their whole life is just not like, oh, I have to work, I have to get into the office, like, and it's, like, the end of the world, like, if something goes wrong, like, in your job. It's like, no, it's gonna be okay. Like, it's not the end of the world. The end of the world is just the end of the world. When I think in the United States, it's like, it's a total collapse, and you're just like so stressed about this whole situation. Like, if you have like a work problem or you made a mistake, like, it's gonna be like, again, it's like the apocalypse, and it's like, you need to calm down, because again, it's like they really do put a lot of importance on it. And not that the Europeans, obviously, they don't really care about their jobs. No, of course not. They absolutely care. But again, I think there's a little bit more perspective about, it's not the only thing that matters in life. Like, there are some more important things in life. Like, again, maybe family, friends, and just living your life, hobbies, or whatever. And probably I obviously I prefer that. And I think probably most people would prefer that sort of like lifestyle of you're living, if you're just living for work, like, okay, so what does that left you like? Because you want to retire early. But, let's put it like in a realistic kind of like point of view, like it's not going to happen. You're not like most people are not going to be able to retire by the time they're 35 or 40. Like it's just a little percentage of the population that it's able to do that. So it's like, why are you like killing yourself and putting yourself into an early grave if you're not going to be able to enjoy, that money that you're making? Because again, maybe you're going to have like a lot of like health issues like down the line. And so it's better to just like take it easy and relax, I think. And again, you're just living, your whole life shouldn't be work and your job. Like there's other things in life that are important. And whether that's, your family, your pets, your friends, your other sort of like whatever it is that you do, other hobbies, other interests, I think they're as important as your job. And I think in Europe, they really do put it like, it's a little bit more of like, it's more balanced and they do understand that. And in the United States, I think it's seen as like, oh, you have a hobby, like, why would you, what would you need? Why would you do that? Or why would you read if that's not, why are you reading like fiction, for instance, like if that's not really giving you, you're not being productive. Like, how is that helping you advance in your career? It's like, you can just have a hobby. Like, it doesn't need to like give me any money, or it doesn't really I can have a hobby that's just not about like learning new things or improving myself. I can just have a hobby that I enjoy because I like doing this. It's like, I think Europeans are a little bit more down those, they understand that concept. And I think in the United States, I think it's a little bit harder for Americans to actually understand that is like, it's okay. Like, it's going to be okay. It's like the extremes, like when it comes to like politics, I think it's kind of sad. I hadn't really thought about it. Like, he makes good points about like how and why. Like, I think Europe is probably a little bit more like, you don't need to lose your friends and your family if you have like opposite political views. I think people are probably more open to debating, and not that, I'm going to change your mind or you're going to change mine, but it's just, I think, a little bit more open about like, what's your point of view on this? And I think it's kind of sad, yes, but he like in the United States, it is kind of crazy, and I think in the last few years it has gotten even crazier. So it is like, yes, you can't really, why would you ruin? I think there's like a vibe shift, and maybe of course there's like a time and place to like discuss politics. And obviously, if everyone's having like a really good time, and that maybe not everyone around you or not everyone that you're hanging out with like shares those like your same political views, I think maybe again in Europe, I think it could be a little more relaxed, and it can be more of an open debate and a good conversation and a good discussion. And in the United States, maybe it's going to be like, oh my God, these people are going to punch each other. Like, no, you're ruining like a really good hangout. So it's like, maybe do not discuss politics. And I am surprised by the fact that he was like, in Portugal, that's not really common. Like, it's not really a topic of discussion. Like, it doesn't really come up in like family gatherings and stuff, which I find very interesting, because it's like, well, I would think like maybe, I don't know, politics are just like surround us basically, because we are part of a society. So it is kind of like interesting in that to hear that apparently like in Portugal, that's not really like that common, and people don't really discuss politics. That was very interesting to me. And of course, like the education and healthcare, like, yes, they're free or next to free. And I think that's proven to be like a better for everyone involved, I think. Like, I don't think anyone's complaining about like, no, I should like pay for this. And of course, like, makes like people, probably like it leads to better like lifestyle, maybe a higher like standard of living. I don't know. I'm just gonna take a wild guess and say yes. But also like something that really was like funny to me was the whole like food situation, that it was like, yes, they have like less probably, I think, chemicals and less, it's probably more natural, and food just tastes better, which I think it's not the first time that I've heard. It's like, yeah, some people do. I think it's just, I think it's gotta be like, I don't know, the fertilizers that they use, and probably again, like the chemicals. It's like, I think vegetables, for instance, like when you're having like a vegetable or a fruit or some sort of like harvestable, it's gonna taste different depending. It tastes different depending on where you're having them. it doesn't, because again, it's like a different type of like, it's a different type of strain of like bananas or apples. And also, of course, the soil really does affect, and again, all the other chemicals that they put like in the food, like really does affect the taste. So it is kind of funny that he's like, yeah, in Europe, like food tastes better. And I think it's like in the United States, I think it's more, I don't know, it's more like everything's little, maybe more perfect visually, but like the taste, it sometimes is not the best because it's more, I don't know, uniform. It doesn't really taste that, like the taste is maybe not as strong. I think that could be like the best way to describe it. And again, it's like you would, and again, maybe you would have like, I don't know, my preference is like, well, maybe this strawberry doesn't look like visually like perfect. It doesn't look like, oh, it looks like a fake strawberry, but if you taste it, like it's gonna taste better than this strawberry that maybe looks like visually perfect. But you know, it's like what really matters at the end of the day is the taste. So those are like very interesting points. And yes, this was a really cool video, and that was it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.